The clang of steel hitting steel is a sound every gamer knows, but in most games, it is the sound of a mistake. Usually when your sword hits a shield or another blade, your character stumbles, you lose your opening, and you have to retreat. But in Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, that sound is not a sign of failure. It is the heartbeat of the entire experience. For years, the developers at FromSoftware had taught us to fear the enemy, to roll away from danger, and to wait for a tiny window to strike. Then in 2019, they decided to take all of those lessons and throw them into the fire. They wanted to create a combat system that was not about surviving an encounter, but about dominating it through sheer, unwavering aggression. This was not just another difficult game from the creators of Dark Souls. This was something much more personal, much faster, and far more brutal than anything we had ever seen before. The question is how a game with no character classes, no multiplayer, and only one primary weapon managed to redefine the entire action genre. To understand that, we have to look past the blood and the difficulty and focus on the one thing that changed everything, which is the dance of the blade. Before Sekiro existed, FromSoftware was defined by the Souls series. Those games were about building a character, finding a huge shield, and slowly chipping away at a boss's health bar. You were a knight in heavy armor, and your best friend was the dodge roll. You spent most of your time looking for an exit or a way to stay safe. When Hideaki Miyazaki and his team began working on a new project, they wanted to break that cycle. They initially looked at the Tenchu series, a classic ninja franchise that FromSoftware actually owned the rights to. They thought about making a new Tenchu game, but as they developed their ideas, the project grew into its own beast. They moved away from the idea of a nameless protagonist and gave us the wolf, a shinobi with a specific voice, a specific mission, and a very specific set of skills. By narrowing the focus to one character with one sword, the developers were able to do something they had never done before, which was to tune the combat to a level of mathematical perfection that an RPG could never achieve. This shift meant that the player could no longer hide behind a high level or a powerful build. In Dark Souls, if a boss was too hard, you could go find a different weapon or summon a friend to help you. In Sekiro, you are completely alone. There is no co-op to save you and no magic spells that can kill a boss from across the room. This was a massive risk for the studio because it removed the safety nets that made their previous games accessible to a wider audience. They replaced those safety nets with a mechanic that would become the core of the game's brutality, which is the posture system. In most games, you watch a health bar. In Sekiro, the health bar is almost secondary. The real battle is for balance. Every time you strike an enemy or deflect their attack perfectly, you damage their posture. If you stop attacking, their posture recovers. This forces the player to stay in the enemy's face at all times. It turns every fight into a high-speed game of chicken where the first person to flinch loses everything. The brutality of Sekiro comes from this constant pressure. You cannot run away to heal because the moment you step back, the boss will regain all the posture damage you worked so hard to build up. This creates a feeling of suffocating intensity. You are forced to stand your ground against enemies that are twice your size, carrying weapons that should realistically crush you in one hit. But the game gives you a tool that feels more powerful than any shield, and that is the parry. When you time your block perfectly, you see a bright spark and hear a loud, satisfying clang. That sound tells you that you are winning. It tells you that even though you are a small shinobi, you have the skill to deflect a blow from a literal god. This was the clashing of swords that Miyazaki wanted to capture. He wanted the player to feel the vibration of the metal and the desperation of a duel to the death. As you move through the early areas of the game, like the Ashina outskirts, the game is quietly teaching you how to survive this new world. You encounter the Chained Ogre, a massive beast that ignores your sword and tries to throw you off a cliff. This fight is there to tell you that not everything can be parried. You have to learn to use your new prosthetic arm, a mechanical limb that can be fitted with tools like a flamethrower or a heavy axe. This arm was a major part of the game's development and a result of FromSoftware's collaboration with Activision. While many fans were worried that a big Western publisher would make the game too easy, Activision actually helped by pushing for better tutorials. They wanted to make sure that when a player died, they knew exactly why they failed. The prosthetic arm provides those solutions. If an enemy has a shield, you use the axe. If an enemy is a beast, you use firecrackers. It makes the player feel like a resourceful predator rather than just a soldier. But even with all those tools, the game eventually hits you with a wall that almost every player remembers, and that is Genichiro Ashina. Genichiro is the turning point of the game. He stands at the top of Ashina Castle, and he is designed to be a final exam for everything you have learned so far. If you try to play Sekiro like Dark Souls against Genichiro, you will lose every single time. He will shoot you with arrows if you run away, and he will punish you if you just sit there and block. To beat him, you have to accept the game's philosophy. You have to deflect his long combos, jump over his sweeps, and use the Mikiri counter to step on his spear. When you finally defeat him, it feels like a graduation. You aren't just a guy with a sword anymore, you are a master of the system. But the game knows that once you feel confident, it needs to find a new way to scare you. That is when we meet the Guardian Ape. This fight starts as a chaotic battle against a giant animal which feels familiar to fans of Bloodborne. You use fire, you dodge his heavy slams, and you eventually cut his head off. The game shows the shinobi execution text on the screen, the music stops, and you think you have won. Then the body starts to move. The headless ape picks up its own severed head and a giant sword, and the music shifts into something terrifying and alien. This is one of the most famous moments in modern gaming because it subverts the player's expectations so perfectly. It takes the shinobi execution message, which usually means safety, and turns it into a lie. It forces you to fight a completely different version of the boss while you are still reeling from the shock of his resurrection. This is where the brutality of Sekiro shifts from mechanical to psychological. The theme of resurrection is not just a gimmick for boss fights, it is the core of the story. The wolf is immortal because of the dragon's heritage, a bloodline that allows him to come back to life after he is killed. In the gameplay, this is a brilliant way to keep the pace fast. Instead of going back to a checkpoint every time you make a tiny mistake, you can stand up right where you died and keep fighting. However, this power comes with a cost. Every time you truly die and return to life, a sickness called dragon rot spreads through the world. The people you have met start coughing and falling ill. Their blood literally becomes stagnant because you are pulling life force from them to stay alive. This adds a layer of guilt to every failure. In most games, dying only hurts the player. In Sekiro, your lack of skill is actively killing the few friends you have left in the world. It makes every encounter feel heavy with responsibility. This narrative weight is what separates Sekiro from other action games. You aren't just fighting for glory or loot. You are fighting for a young boy named Kuro who wants to end the cycle of immortality because he sees how it corrupts everyone it touches. The villains are not necessarily evil people. They are desperate. Genichiro wants immortality to save his land from being conquered by the central government. The sculptor is a man haunted by his past as a Shura, a person who killed so many people that they became a demon of fire. The world is ending. The era of the samurai is over, and you are caught in the middle of a collapsing society. The environments reflect this beauty and decay, from the falling snow of Ashina to the golden leaves of the Senpo temple. But the temple itself hides a dark secret. The monks there have abandoned Buddhism to search for immortality, leading to experiments on children and the creation of horrific, undying monsters. As you explore these areas, you discover that the game is full of hidden details that explain why the world is so broken. You find out that the rejuvenating waters people drink to become immortal are actually infested with parasites. The bosses you fight are often victims of these parasites, trapped in bodies that cannot die even when they are mangled. This is the brutality that the title of our documentary refers to. It is a world where death is a mercy that nobody can find. The only way to provide that mercy is with the Mortal Blade, a special sword that can kill the undying. Obtaining this blade is a journey into the heart of the game's mythology, involving the divine child and the folding screen monkeys. It is a quest that changes the wolf from a simple bodyguard into a bringer of death, which is the only way he can truly be a savior. One of the most controversial aspects of this journey was the difficulty, which sparked a massive debate across the internet. When the game was released, some critics and players argued that it needed an easy mode. They felt that the strict requirements of the combat system excluded people who didn't have fast reflexes or the time to practice for hours. This led to a huge discussion about accessibility versus artistic vision. The fans of the game argued that the difficulty was the point. If you could just press a button to win, the feeling of overcoming a boss like the great shinobi owl would be gone. The owl is another incredible example of the game's design. He's your father and the man who taught you everything you know.
during the fight, he uses the same tricks you use. He can use firecrackers, he can heal himself, and he can even perform a Makiri counter on you if you try to use a thrust attack. It's a mirror match that tests your loyalty and your skill at the same time. The debate about difficulty reached a peak when a journalist admitted to using a PC mod to slow down the game's speed so they could beat the final boss. The good community was outraged, but the conversation actually highlighted how unique Sekiro is. It is a game that demands your total attention. You cannot listen to a podcast or watch a video while playing Sekiro. You have to listen to the rhythm of the enemy's attacks. Some players even compared the combat to a rhythm game like Guitar Hero. Once you stop trying to react to every move and start feeling the beat of the enemy's attacks, the game opens up. The brutality fades away and is replaced by a sense of flow. This is why many people consider Sekiro to be the most fair game FromSoftware has ever made. Every death is your fault, but every victory is entirely your own. This sense of mastery is tested one last time by the final boss, Ishin the Sword Saint. Ishin is often cited as one of the hardest bosses in the history of video games, and for good reason. He has 4 different phases, and he uses a sword, a spear, a gun, and even lightning. He is the ultimate personification of the game's combat. To beat him, you have to use everything you have learned over 30 or 40 hours of play. You have to be perfect for 10 minutes straight. There's no trick to beating him and no way to cheese the fight. You just have to be better than him. When you finally deliver the final blow and the screen flashes with "Immortalized Severed," it is one of the most cathartic moments in the medium. You realize that the game didn't just give you a challenge, it transformed you as a player. You started the game as a weak shinobi who lost his arm to Genichiro, and you ended it by defeating the greatest warrior who ever lived. The impact of Sekiro is still being felt in the gaming world today. You can see its influence in games like Sifu, which uses a similar structure system, or Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which adopted the parrying mechanics for a broader audience. Even Elden Ring, FromSoftware's massive open-world hit, took lessons from Sekiro, specifically in how it handles chumping and guard counters. But Sekiro remains a singular experience because it refused to compromise. It didn't try to be everything for everyone. It wanted to be a perfect simulation of a sword fight, and it achieved that. It showed us that brutality isn't just about how much blood is on the screen, it's about the weight of the steel and the cost of a single mistake. It proved that sometimes the most rewarding experience a game can provide is the one that forces you to meet it on its own terms and never back down. In the end, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is a story about the end of an era. It's about a world that is clinging to life through unnatural means, and a man who has to find the strength to let it go. Through its revolutionary posture system, its terrifying boss designs, and its uncompromising difficulty, it raised the bar for what action games can be. It didn't just make combat more brutal, it made it more meaningful. Every swing of the sword is a choice, and every parry is a statement of will. As the credits roll, you don't just feel like you finished a game, you feel like you survived a war, and that is a feeling that very few titles have ever been able to replicate. To summarize, Sekiro redefined combat by shifting the focus from health to posture, forcing a style of aggressive, rhythmic play that no other game had mastered. It stripped away the RPG elements to ensure every player faced a monumental challenge, leading to some of the most intense boss encounters ever designed. Through the story of the wolf and his struggle with immortality, FromSoftware created a masterpiece that remains a gold standard for the action genre. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Sekiro, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the like button. Let me know in the comments which boss gave you the most trouble, and share this video with your fellow shinobi. Would you like me to create a similar documentary on the evolution of the combat in Bloodborne or the hidden lore of Elden Ring?